All right, let's dive into the world of trees. We're going deep with all those Wikipedia articles you've been reading, and wow, prepping for this has already blown my mind.
Yeah, it's amazing how much there is to learn about trees, isn't it? You think you know something, and then bam, a
Yeah.
whole new layer of complexity opens up.
Totally. Like, I always thought I had a pretty good grasp on trees, but it turns out defining a tree is way more complicated than I realized.
It really is. There's no one-size-fits-all definition. It's more like a spectrum, with some plants falling right on the borderline. Like, take papaya trees, for instance. Would you consider those trees?
Well, they're tall and have a single trunk. So yeah, I guess I would, but now I'm second-guessing myself.
Right. It gets tricky. Papaya and even bananas are considered trees by some definitions because they have that single elongated stem with leaves on top. But then you've got palms, Joshua trees, bamboos. They grow tall too, but their internal structure is different.
So what's the key difference? What makes an oak a tree, but a palm? Not quite.
It all comes down to how they grow. True trees, like oaks, have what we call secondary growth. That means their trunks get thicker each year because they add new layers of woody tissue. You know, those annual growth rings you see.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. So palms and bananas are out because they don't have that woody growth. But what about Joshua trees and bamboos? They seem pretty steady to me.
They are. They've developed their own kind of pseudo-wood. It's not exactly the same as the wood you'd find in an oak or a pine, but it gives them that structural strength. Nature's pretty ingenious, finding different ways to solve the same problem.
That's so cool. It's like nature's constantly experimenting with new materials and designs. So we've got the broad definition, the woody trunk definition. Are there any other ways people define trees?
Well, sometimes it boils down to practicality. If a plant gives us lumber that we can use, then it's a tree. Simple as that.
Haha, the if you can build a house with it test. Makes sense from a human perspective. But all these different definitions make me wonder just how many kinds of trees are out there.
Oh man, the sheer diversity is mind-blowing. We're talking somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 different species worldwide. It's like imagining a library where every single book is a different kind of tree.
Whoa, that's insane. I can barely keep track of the trees in my own neighborhood. And to think the whole tree form, that tall trunk with branches that evolved independently in so many different plant lineages.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of what we call convergent evolution, where different organisms end up with similar solutions because they're facing the same challenges. In this case, it's all about reaching for that precious sunlight.
And I'm guessing when it comes to sunlight, the tropics must be like tree paradise.
You got it. Tropical rainforests are like biodiversity hotspots for trees. The Amazon, for instance, is home to an incredible variety of tree species, and many of them are still completely unknown to science.
I think those rainforests are giant, unexplored libraries just full of undiscovered tree species. So cool. But I'm guessing trees aren't just limited to those warm tropical areas.
Nope, not at all. Trees are amazingly adaptable. They've found ways to thrive in all sorts of environments. Think about conifers, like pine trees, with their needle-like leaves. They're perfectly suited to handle colder climates and harsh conditions.
So they're like the tough guys of the tree world, able to withstand snow, ice, all that crazy stuff.
Exactly. But even in those milder, temperate regions where things are a bit more chill, you still find an amazing variety of trees. Those oaks, maples, beeches, they're the ones that give us those stunning fall colors.
Okay, so now we have a sense of just how diverse trees are and where they hang out. But what about what's going on beneath the surface? What's happening down in the roots?
Ah, the roots. Those are the unsung heroes of the tree world. Way more than just anchors. They're a lifeline.
I'm starting to realize that there's a lot more to roots than meets the eye. They're not just those static things holding the tree in place.
Not even close. Imagine them as this vast network of tiny fingers reaching out and soaking up water and all those vital nutrients from the soil. And they do it with incredible efficiency.
Okay, but how do they actually absorb those nutrients? I mean, it's not like they have little mouths down there.
That's where things get really interesting. Tree roots have these microscopic root hairs. They're single cells that just massively increase the surface area for absorption. It's like having thousands of tiny straws pulling in water and minerals from the surrounding soil.
So it's all about maximizing surface area, like a giant sponge underground. But I've also heard about these partnerships between tree roots and fungi. Is that where mycorrhizae come in?
Bingo. Mycorrhiza are like the ultimate example of teamwork in nature. It's this mutually beneficial relationship between tree roots and certain types of fungi. Think of it as an underground trading network.
Okay, so what's the tree getting out of this deal?
The fungi act like extensions of the roots, helping the tree absorb even more water and nutrients, especially phosphorus, which is super important for growth. And in return, the tree provides the fungi with sugars that it makes during photosynthesis. It's a win-win, and it shows you how interconnected everything is in a forest.
It's amazing how nature has evolved these complex relationships. And it's not just cooperation with other organisms, right? Trees can actually connect with each other through their root systems.
That's right. It's called natural grafting, where the roots of two trees grow together and fuse, basically becoming one organism. They share resources, support each other, and maybe even send signals back and forth.
Whoa, it's like a secret society of trees communicating and supporting each other beneath the ground.
That's so cool. Any other surprises lurking down in the root zone?
Well, not all roots stay buried underground. Some trees have what we call aerial roots, which grow above ground.
Now that's just showing off. Why would a tree need roots up in the air?
It all comes down to the environment they live in. Mangroves, for instance, thrive in coastal areas with soft, muddy soil. Those aerial roots help them anchor themselves and even absorb oxygen directly from the air.
It's like they've evolved snorkels for their roots. Okay, let's move up from the roots now and talk about another essential part of a tree. The trunk. What's its main job? The trunk is like the backbone of the tree, supporting that whole crown and helping it reach for the sunlight. But it's also a transportation hub.
A hub? You mean for all that water and nutrients the roots are absorbing?
Exactly. The trunk contains these specialized tissues called xylem and phloem. Xylem carries water and minerals up from the roots to the leaves, while phloem transports sugars made during photosynthesis to other parts of the tree.
So it's like a two-way street inside the trunk, with resources constantly moving up and down. Okay, now what about bark? It always seems so tough and rugged. What's its purpose?
Bark is a tree's armor. It protects the tree from the elements, disease, even fire.
Armor, huh? Against what? I mean, I've seen trees with holes bored into their bark and insects crawling all over them.
You're right, bark isn't foolproof.
Yeah.
Insects, fungi, even some animals can get through the bark, and that can be a real threat to the tree's health. Like Dutch elm disease, which is a fungal infection spread by beetles, has wiped out huge numbers of elm trees around the world.
That's a good reminder that even with armor, trees aren't invincible. Speaking of bark, I've always wondered about those tiny bumps you see on some trees. What are those?
Those are lenticels, basically tiny pores that allow for gas exchange. It's how the living tissues beneath the bark can breathe, taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide.
Ah, that makes sense. So even though bark is tough and protective, it still has to allow for breathing. It's all about balance, isn't it?
Exactly. And just like everything else with trees, bark comes in a ton of different forms. Pines, for example, have thick, resinous bark that helps deter insects, while rubber trees produce a milky latex when they're wounded.
It's incredible how every single detail of a tree seems to serve a purpose. But we've been so focused on the roots and the trunk, I almost forgot about the most obvious part. What about the leaves?
Ah, yes, the leaves. That's where the magic of photosynthesis happens. They're like tiny solar-powered factories capturing sunlight and turning it into energy to fuel the tree's growth.
Love that analogy. And speaking of factories, leaves come in such an amazing variety of shapes and sizes. Why is that?
Each leaf is like a masterpiece of adaptation, perfectly designed for its environment. For instance, conifer needles are a brilliant solution for surviving in harsh conditions. Their narrow shape and waxy coating help them conserve water and prevent freezing.
So they're built for those extreme environments. What about those big, broad leaves we see on deciduous trees, like maples and oaks? They seem much more delicate.
Those broad leaves are powerhouses for photosynthesis, soaking up as much sunlight as possible. But in colder climates, those big leaves can be a problem in winter. That's why deciduous trees shed their leaves in the fall.
It's like they're trading in their summer wardrobe for a cozy winter outfit. But what triggers that incredible color change before the leaves drop?
Well, as the days get shorter and the temperature starts to drop, the tree begins breaking down the chlorophyll in its leaves. That's what gives them their green color. And those beautiful yellows, oranges, and reds were there all along, hidden by the chlorophyll.
So those fall colors are like a grand finale before the tree settles in for a long winter's nap. That's awesome. Okay, we've covered roots, trunks, bark, and leaves. But what about the part of the tree that ensures its lineage continues? The seeds.
Seeds are a testament to the incredible reproductive strategies of trees, coming in all shapes and sizes, each perfectly adapted for its own unique dispersal method.
It's amazing how even the tiniest details of a tree are tied to its survival. I know wind plays a role for some species, especially those with those helicopter-like seeds. But what about the trees that don't rely on the wind?
Many trees have evolved to partner up with animals for seed dispersal. Think about all those delicious fruits that trees produce: apples, cherries, berries. Those fruits are designed to attract animals who eat them and then, well, deposit the seeds elsewhere.
So it's a win-win, a tasty treat for the animal, and a free ride for the seed. But some trees take a more explosive approach, right?
Absolutely. Some trees, like certain types of eucalyptus, have these seed pods that burst open with incredible force, launching seeds far and wide. It's quite a show.
It's like a botanical fireworks display. But how do tree seeds know when it's the right time to germinate? Seems risky to just sprout up whenever.
Timing is everything. Many tree seeds have what we call a dormancy period, where they basically wait for the perfect conditions to sprout. It's like they have a built-in alarm clock, triggered by things like temperature, moisture, and even fire.
Fire? Really? I wouldn't think fire would be a good thing for a tiny seed.
For some species, fire is essential. Like, the jack pine actually relies on fire to crack open its tough cones, which releases the seeds. And the ash from a fire enriches the soil, making it a better place for those seeds to germinate. It's another example of how nature uses disturbance to create new opportunities.
It's like a reset button for the forest. This is also fascinating, but now I'm curious about the bigger picture. Where did these amazing plants come from? How far back do we have to go to find the ancestors of modern trees?
To answer that, we need to take a trip back in time, millions of years ago, to the Carboniferous period. That's when the first true trees appeared on Earth.
Wow, we're talking way before dinosaurs roamed around. What did those early trees even look like?
They were pretty different from the trees we see today. Picture giant ferns, horsetails, and lycophytes dominating the landscape.
Giant ferns, so like the ferns I see in my garden, but supersized.
Exactly. These ancient ferns could grow to incredible heights, forming vast, swampy forests. They were the kings of the plant world for millions of years and played a huge role in shaping the Earth's atmosphere.
It's mind-blowing to think that those ancient ferns are the ancestors of all the trees we see today.
Well, not directly. The giant ferns eventually went extinct, but they paved the way for the evolution of gymnosperms, the first trees to produce seeds.
Gymnosperms. That's like pine trees and stuff, right?
Yep. Conifers, cycads, ginkgos, and a few other groups are all considered gymnosperms. And the evolution of seeds was a major game changer. Seeds are way more resilient than spores, which allowed trees to colonize new environments and survive harsher conditions.
So seeds were a key innovation in the evolution of trees. But when did the trees we're most familiar with, the ones with flowers and fruits, when did they show up?
The angiosperms, or flowering plants, arrived much later, during the Cretaceous period, and they took off. They're relative newcomers to the tree world, but have diversified into this incredible array of forms, from towering oaks to delicate cherry blossoms.
And we've definitely benefited from those delicious fruits and gorgeous flowers. But beyond their beauty, trees play a crucial role in keeping our planet healthy, right?
Absolutely. Trees are essential to terrestrial ecosystems. They provide habitats for countless species, they stabilize the soil, they regulate water cycles, and they even influence the climate.
Right, they're like giant air filters, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which helps to combat climate change.
That's a great analogy. And their ability to store huge amounts of carbon in their wood and roots makes them key players in the fight against climate change.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here, from the basic definition of a tree to their evolution, their ecological roles, even a bit of their history. It's clear that trees are way more than just static objects in the landscape. They're dynamic, they're complex, and they're vital to life on Earth.
They truly are. What's fascinating is that every tree is like a living history book. From the rings in its trunk to the way its branches grow, it tells a story of its environment and all the challenges it has faced and overcome.
I love that. It makes you want to go out and read the stories of every tree you encounter. But before we move on, what's been the biggest takeaway for you so far? What's your favorite tree fact or adaptation? We'll be right back after a short day.
That's a tough one. There's so much to choose from. But the way trees can connect and communicate through their root systems, that's still blowing my mind. It's like this hidden language of the forest, a silent network of cooperation and support.
I agree. That was definitely one of the most fascinating things we talked about. It really changes how you think about trees as individuals.
Yeah.
They're far more interconnected than we often realize.
Exactly. And that interconnectedness makes them even more resilient and adaptable. It's a lesson we humans could definitely learn from.
Okay, so we've explored the ecological side of trees, but let's not forget about their importance to us humans. Throughout history, trees have provided us with food, fuel, shelter, medicine, inspiration.
They've been essential to our survival, shaping our cultures and beliefs in profound ways.
And who doesn't love a juicy apple or a handful of fresh berries? Trees provide us with so much delicious and nutritious food.
Absolutely. Fruits, nuts, spices, syrups, trees offer a diverse pantry for humans to enjoy.
And let's not forget about maple syrup. It's liquid gold, tapped straight from the heart of a sugar maple tree.
Maple syrup is a perfect example of how humans can sustainably harvest from trees, respecting their natural cycles and ensuring their continued well-being.
It's a reminder that trees are truly a gift that keeps on giving. But food isn't the only way we've relied on trees. What about fuel?
Wood has been the primary source of fuel for heating and cooking for thousands of years. And even today, in many parts of the world, wood is still a vital source of energy.
It's fascinating how something as basic as wood can connect us to our ancestors and their relationship with nature.
It really is. And while burning wood on an open fire might seem old-fashioned, modern wood-burning technologies like those efficient stoves and wood pellets offer cleaner and more sustainable ways to utilize that energy stored in trees.
So wood can actually be part of a sustainable future. That's great to hear.
Absolutely. Especially when it's harvested responsibly from sustainably managed forests.
Okay, so we've talked about food and fuel. But there's another major use of trees that we can't forget. Timber. I mean, wood is everywhere. Our homes, our furniture, even the paper we write on.
Timber has been a fundamental building block of human civilization, providing the material for everything from simple shelters to grand structures.
And it's not just about raw lumber anymore, is it? We've got all sorts of engineered wood products now, too.
Exactly. Plywood, fiberboard, particle board. These materials take wood fibers and use them in new and innovative ways, creating strong, versatile, and sustainable building materials.
It's amazing how we found so many ways to utilize the strength and versatility of wood. But it's not all about practicality, right? Trees have also inspired countless works of art and played a huge role in mythology and spirituality across cultures.
Trees definitely have a deep-rooted presence in human culture. They're often seen as symbols of strength, wisdom, and interconnectedness.
Yeah, like the tree of life, which pops up in so many different spiritual traditions. It's usually depicted as this cosmic tree connecting heaven and earth, representing how everything is connected.
And in Norse mythology, you have Yggdrasil, the world tree, a giant ash tree that connects all 9 realms of existence.
It's so interesting how trees have taken on these prominent roles in our stories and beliefs. It really speaks to their power and the sense of wonder they evoke in us.
It does. And even today, trees continue to capture our imagination. Take bonsai, for instance.
Bonsai is such a cool art form, shaping miniature trees into living sculptures. It requires so much patience and skill to cultivate a bonsai, but the results are incredible.
It's a testament to that human fascination with trees, our desire to understand and connect with them on a deeper level.
It really is. You know, even after this deep dive into the world of trees, I feel like I've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn and explore.
There is. Trees are endlessly fascinating. They challenge our perceptions of life, time, interconnectedness. They teach us about resilience, adaptability, the power of slow, steady growth.
Okay, I have to ask, what about those record-breaking trees? The ones that push the limits of what we thought was possible?
Oh, you mean the superlative trees, the
The-
tallest, the oldest, the widest.
Exactly. Hit me with the tree facts that will blow my mind.
All right, get ready. The tallest known tree on Earth is Hyperion, a coast redwood that towers over 115 meters. That's taller than the Statue of Liberty.
Wow. I can't even imagine standing at the base of something that massive. What about the oldest tree?
The oldest known living tree is an unnamed Great Basin bristlecone pine, clinging to life in those harsh, high-altitude mountains of California. It's estimated to be over 5,079 years old.
No way. That tree was alive before the pyramids were built.
It's a true testament to the resilience and longevity of trees. And if you're looking for pure girth, you've got to check out Arbol del Tu, a Montezuma cypress in Mexico. Its trunk is so wide, it takes over 30 people holding hands to circle it.
Okay, that's the tree I need to hug someday. Those superlative trees are like the celebrities of the plant world.
They are, and they're a reminder of the incredible diversity and wonder of the natural world.
Okay, this deep dive has been incredible. We've covered so much from the basic definition of a tree to their evolution, their importance to ecosystems, and their significance in human culture. It's clear that trees are much more than just static objects in the landscape. They're dynamic, they're complex, and they're absolutely crucial to life on Earth.
I couldn't agree more. And even with all we know, there's still so much more to learn about these amazing plants. They never cease to amaze and inspire us.
Totally. But before we wrap up this part of our exploration, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about something more serious. The threats facing trees today. It's no secret that deforestation, climate change, and disease are putting enormous pressure on tree populations around the world.
It's a tough reality to face. The IUCN Red List, which tracks the conservation status of species, lists thousands of tree species as threatened with extinction. And we're losing forests at a truly alarming rate.
It's heartbreaking to think about all those unique and valuable tree species disappearing. What can we do to protect these incredible plants?
There's actually a lot we can do, both as individuals and as a society. Supporting conservation efforts, pushing for sustainable forestry practices, and reducing our own carbon footprint are all essential steps.
We need to act as stewards of the forests, not just consumers of their resources.
Exactly. We have a responsibility to protect these ancient and essential life forms, not just for ourselves, but for the health of the planet.
Well said. We'll be back with our final thoughts after a short.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of these issues, but I think it's important to remember that every action counts. Even small changes can have a ripple effect.
I'm with you on that. Like that saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Exactly. Planting a single tree in your backyard, that's a step in the right direction.
So to our listeners, if you're feeling inspired, here's the challenge. The next time you're outside, really take a moment to see the trees around you.
Notice their shapes, their textures, the way their branches reach for the sky. Imagine the stories they could tell.
Speaking of stories, we've talked a lot about the science and the practical uses of trees, but what about their deeper meaning? Trees have always held a special place in our cultures and mythology, haven't they?
They have. Throughout history and across cultures, trees have been symbols of strength, wisdom, fertility, even immortality.
Yeah, like the tree of life, a powerful image that shows up in so many spiritual traditions. It's often depicted as a cosmic tree, connecting heaven and earth.
And in Norse mythology, you have Yggdrasil, the world tree, this giant ash tree that connects all 9 realms of existence.
It's incredible how trees have taken on these significant roles in our stories and beliefs. It shows how much they resonate with us.
Absolutely. And even in modern times, trees still spark our imagination. Just think about the art of bonsai, for example.
Bonsai is such a fascinating blend of horticulture and art, shaping these miniature trees into living sculptures. The patience and skill required to cultivate a bonsai are incredible.
It's a real testament to that human fascination with trees, our desire to connect with them on a deeper level.
It's amazing. Even after diving deep into this world of trees, I feel like we've only just begun to explore all there is to know.
There's always more to discover. Trees are full of surprises. They challenge our ideas about life, time, how everything's connected. They teach us about resilience, adaptability, the beauty of slow growth.
Okay, I have one last question before we wrap up. We've talked about how interconnected trees are, their ability to communicate, their incredible lifespan.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, could trees actually be the wisest living beings on Earth?
Now that's a deep question. They've definitely seen it all. The rise and fall of civilizations, the changing seasons over thousands of years, the delicate balance of life unfolding.
I think there's a lot we can learn from trees about resilience, about adapting to change, about the interconnectedness of all living things. And maybe, just maybe, they hold a kind of wisdom that we're only beginning to understand.
Perhaps by paying closer attention to them, by really listening to their silent stories, we can start to unlock some of that ancient wisdom.
What a beautiful thought. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this amazing journey into the world of trees.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you've learned something new, maybe gained a new appreciation for trees, and maybe even feel inspired to give a tree a hug today. I know I'm definitely walking away with a whole new respect for trees. They're so familiar, and yet there's still this element of mystery and awe.
That's the beauty of nature, isn't it? There's always more to uncover, more to learn.
Speaking of uncovering things, I can't stop thinking about those tree rings we discussed earlier, each one like a fingerprint, holding a year of that tree's life.
It's pretty remarkable. Those rings can tell us so much about the tree's past, not just how old it is, but the climate conditions it lived through. Was there a drought? A fire? Even insect attacks?
Wait, so you're telling me we can actually decode those rings and learn about the history of a tree and in turn the history of the environment around it?
Exactly. It's like having a time machine built right into the tree itself. Dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, is this fascinating field that combines biology, history, archaeology.
Dendrochronology.
Okay.
Is that going on my list of things to learn more about?
You should. It's amazing what you can find out from those rings.
Okay, before we go down that rabbit hole, I want to circle back to that question we posed earlier. Could trees actually be the wisest living organisms on Earth?
It's a great question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. But trees definitely have something to teach us about living in harmony with nature.
I totally agree. They embody this incredible resilience, this ability to adapt and thrive, no matter what life throws at them.
They don't rush, they endure, they understand those natural cycles of growth and decay.
And they're experts at cooperation, working with fungi, bacteria, even other trees, to create these thriving ecosystems.
They've witnessed the passing of time on a scale we can barely grasp. They're silent witnesses to the history of our planet.
There's a profound wisdom in that, I think. A wisdom that speaks to the interconnectedness of all living things, the importance of patience, the power of perseverance.
I think you're right. Maybe their wisdom isn't about conscious thought, but about their very being, their connection to the rhythms of nature, their ability to withstand any storm.
I love that. It's a good reminder that wisdom comes in many forms, not just through intellect or words.
Absolutely. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from simply observing, contemplating, being present in nature.
And that brings us back to our listeners. If this deep dive has inspired you, we encourage you to go out and spend some time with trees.
Visit a park, a forest, even just take a walk down your street. Really look at the trees around you.
Listen to the rustling of their leaves. Feel the texture of their bark. Imagine the stories they hold within their rings.
And ask yourself, what can you learn from these ancient, wise beings? How can you apply their lessons to your own life?
What a perfect way to wrap up this conversation. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of trees.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have. And remember, the world of trees is always out there, waiting to be discovered. Keep exploring.